Welcome to So and So, brought to you by Bernina Made to Create. I'm Meg Goodman, and you're about to enjoy a casual conversation with a special member of the sewist and quilting community. A conversation about how they got started, what inspires them, what excites them, and their connection to this community. Our guest today is Melanie Jasmine, a costume designer and makeup artist based in Texas. With more than 10 years of experience in sewing and design, she began her involvement in the cosplay community at age 15. Within the community, she hosts panels and crafting sessions, judges cosplay contests, and is a brand ambassador. She's part of a newer generation of professional cosplayers who blend costume design, performance, makeup artistry, and branded content creation. In addition to sewing and fabrication, she's known for combining advanced makeup techniques with costuming to complete full character transformations. She's worked with a variety of brands such as Lootcrate, 20th Century Fox, Dreamhack, Anime Expo, Dallas Fuel, Hulu, Coca Cola, and Blizzard Entertainment, creating promotional content and organizing meetups. Her work has won numerous awards, and when not busy creating, she can be found doing guest appearances around the country. Melanie Jasmine, welcome to So and So.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I've seen a lot of your work online, and it is amazing. And I can't wait to talk about it, learn about it. And I'm going to say, how did you learn to sew, and who influenced your sewing?
So, I have been sewing for a while. My grandmother actually taught me how to sew back there when I lived in Ecuador. I was about 13, 14 years old when I first approached her and I asked her, hey, I want to know how you actually do all this. Funny enough, my grandma, she had a Singer cast iron machine. So that machine didn't even work with electricity. You actually had to, use the pedal, and
Uh-huh.
it was a true workout, just to get the machine going. But that machine was actually going, and she actually made garments. She made clothes. She made dresses, and I remember she had this treasure trove of just fabrics, her stash, like we all do. And so I was just grabbing stuff from her stash, and she was showing me the basics and how things work. So I will say, yes, that's what really got me curious about sewing. And actually, my two grandmothers, so like my grandmother from my father's side, she taught me what I know. And then my grandmother from my mother's side, she also knew how to sew, but she was a little bit more like, I will say she was also always making dresses, but she always looked so busy. So I was at some point I had I guess the courage to approach her and be like, "Hey, can you show me how to do this?" So yeah, I will say both of them, but truly they both have just a very special place in my heart. And I guess it's also very funny that neither of them quilted, so they were both garment makers.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's definitely why I went that way, because they both were making garments. They were fixing my uniform for high school. They were just making sure that my clothes always looked nice. So that's definitely what influenced me the most.
So you started into cosplay at 15, but tell us about Melanie as a little girl before cosplay.
Well, Melanie, as a little girl before cosplay, was very shy, a very introverted nerd. I always liked anime, video games. Well, back then we didn't have, the super fancy video games, but the super basic Nintendo 64 type of video games. But I was always interested in all those characters with the crazy clothing. That was the thing for me, because at some point I remember in high school, I remember thinking to myself, normal clothes and uniforms are just so boring. I wish I could wear something fancier, something crazier. But before I even got into cosplay and costuming, yeah, I was just a child living her best life in Ecuador, just having fun, enjoying school. But I do remember mostly that I was very shy, very introverted, and just the whole cosplay and costuming and connecting with my community truly helped me come out of my shell. Yeah, I think so.
So you're from Ecuador.
Mhm.
What brought you to the United States?
A dream in a sewing machine, really, funny enough. So I was actually accepted in a university in Louisiana to study psychology. So as soon as I finished high school, they offered me a scholarship, full ride to come up here and study, and that's what I did. But while I was here studying in college, I also had a part-time job, and I had to maintain 4.5, 4.5, that's what it is, a 3.5 GPA,
Hmm.
and I was also doing cosplay and costuming on the side because it was so big here. And on top of education, one of the things that brought me here was that I remember, again, in high school, I remember seeing all of those fun videos of conventions here and how cosplay was huge here because, again, in Ecuador, it was not as big and it was really hard to get materials. Like, we didn't have a Joann's, we didn't have a Michael's, nothing like that. So even to get materials, I will have to walk hours on end. We didn't have
Hmm.
Amazon, we didn't have online orders. So it was all about walking around stores and just asking for materials, finding wholesalers, the people who are usually selling rolls of fabric to factories and companies, checking if they will sell you fabric by the yard, or even for the EVA foam, I will have to get it from the shoemakers that were willing to sell it to me. So it was definitely difficult to find materials, and just having that ease to get my materials and seeing the community up here and all the amazing costumes that everybody was making definitely inspired me. And I remember two things. Number one, when I got my scholarship, I also thought, oh my goodness, I will get to cosplay up there and I will find my people. And number two was my first purchase on Amazon. As soon as I discovered Amazon, was actually a sewing machine. So it was a journey.
And so much easier to acquire what you need now.
Oh, 100%. Nowadays is even with Joanne's gone. Again, I don't think anybody has experienced walking for hours on end just to find a piece of fabric.
Sure.
It's yeah, so not truly, even without Joanne's, we're in such a better spot in terms of accessibility to materials and tools and education. So no, that makes me very happy for the new generations of cosplayers and sewists and makers alike.
So you talk about being shy
Hmm.
and finding your people. So let's talk about what first drew you to costume making, and tell us about the very first piece you ever created.
Sure. So I'm trying to think. The very, very first that will qualify as a costume. Um, I remember my friends and I actually entered a dancing competition, and this was not so it was not like a specific character that we were cosplaying. It was more like we wanted to have matching outfits inspired by Vocaloid. So I don't know if you or the audience are familiar with Vocaloid, but if you are familiar with Hatsune Miku and all of those characters, the synthesizers, so anyway, long story short, we had like this dance inspired by Vocaloid, and I made the costumes for all of us with the help of some of my friends who already know how to sew, and that really inspired me. And it was just really cool for me knowing that I could just create those pieces and also give them to my friends and
Hmm.
do an activity together. So since then, I just kept going and going because that's what costuming was about to me. Like, not only the fancy clothes and um, just what you're wearing and the garment, is also who you wear it with and experiences that you can make through it.
So, how did these early years in the cosplay community shape the way you approach sewing and design today?
Well, I think that so since I came from a place, well, I learned as a garment maker first, and I think that is very important. Um, I have seen nowadays that obviously you can just modify a piece of clothing or modify the costumes that you get online, but truly to understand how a piece of clothing works, you need to learn how to make clothes first. I mean, you can make a costume without that experience, and that is fine,
Hmm.
but when you learn about garment making, you understand why certain pattern pieces are shaped the way they are, why we have certain seam allowances, why we use an overlock stitch versus a straight stitch, why we use interfacing, why we use lining, So once it's like having a very, very solid foundation of what should be done beforehand and just understanding how fabric pieces together, how it moves, how it works with each other, different textures, shapes, even the spandex content in a piece of fabric, it affects the way that your costumes will look in the end.
Hmm.
So, since I learned from the very beginning about how all those pieces are made and how it all works together as a garment, then to me, it was just really easy to give it a fun twist and break the rules with costuming with a very solid foundation.
So, in addition to your costume design, you work with makeup artistry. So, talk a little bit about how these two disciplines influence each other in your creative process.
For sure. So this is the fun thing about cosplay that is not just about the garment piece. There is always more elements involved. Most of the time, like you mentioned, will be the makeup or it could be body paint and it could be a fun wig. So when you're making a costume, what you have to have in mind is also how all of those other elements will tie together and how to make them work in tandem. For instance, if we think, let's just say Gamora from Guardians of the Galaxy, or a character like someone from Avatar, the big blue Navi aliens, you have to also think about body paint. You have to think about, first of all, how long is going to take you to get ready. Um, Anything involving body paint is
Hmm.
always fun, but you have to think about, okay, which pieces of fabric are going to rub off against my skin?
Mm. Hmm.
How do I balance the right shade of green or blue against the rest of my costuming pieces? Or if you are wearing a nowadays we have these leotards that you can match to these funny colors so that you don't have to paint your entire body. So you have to think, okay, how can I match my body paint to the rest of the leotard that I will be wearing? Or like, how do I make sure that this doesn't rub off the entire day that I'm wearing it? You also have to decide, do I want my makeup to be screen accurate, or do I want to, give it my little twist? What type of makeup works better for my face shape versus what someone on screen may be wearing. The type of contacts that you will be wearing, depending on your eye color, the shape of your contacts. There's a lot that you also have to keep in mind and make sure that everything at the end looks cohesive, at least when you are doing this professionally or you're entering a costume in a competition, that even though you have so many different pieces made out of different materials, many textures, many shapes and colors, they all look cohesive together. And that
Hmm.
is very, very important.
So, let's take this a step further. Cosplay involves a lot of unconventional materials and
Hmm.
techniques. So, share with us a few of your tools or fabrics or methods that are just super important to you.
Sure. Would you like the unconventional ones or the conventional ones first?
Oh, let's go unconventional.
Okay, sure. So, one of the most unconventional ones I will say is PVC pipes. We use those a lot in cosplay,
Uh huh.
and you probably won't even notice. I love using PVC pipes for structures. So when I have to make a large staff or whenever I make wings, I make my bases with PVC pipe because You can always find connectors because you can, with a little bit of heat, you can bend them and shape them. And yeah, they're very cheap. You can just get them at the Home Depot. So that has to be one of my favorite things that I always have in handy in all diameters and thicknesses. And I just have a bunch of PVC pipes laying in my garage just for cosplay.
Hmm.
And you will think I'm a plumber, but no, just for structures. So that's a fun one to work with. And acrylics, I love working with acrylics. We're talking about acrylic sheets, all thicknesses, 5 millimeters, 3 millimeters. I even have some sheets that are 10 millimeters. And we use these to make invisible structures. I usually cut them with lasers. So, yeah, those are pretty unconventional, I will argue. And then my most conventional tools, I can give you a whole list, but number one is always going to be my sewing machine.
Hmm.
Always, always, always. I joke around, as long as I have my sewing machine and my sewing kit, I can make anything happen, literally. So I have a travel sewing machine. Now I just acquired a B38 from Burnett.
Hmm.
So I'm really excited. That is going to be my new travel machine. But I also travel with a nice pair of shears. I travel with a cutting mat, a rotary cutter. I have actually quilting rulers. Believe it or not, I love quilting rulers in a pinch. They are perfect. And I have I always carry a pair of pliers because you never know what you're going to have to bend in my super glue. I will say, as long as I have those, some thread. Obviously, you need some strong thread. So as long as I have those, I will be okay.
So let's talk about some of your collaborations. You've worked with brands like 20th Century Fox, Blizzard, Hulu, Coca Cola. Is there a difference with creating costumes for brand collaborations versus competitions or personal projects?
Absolutely. These are they will be very different. The final result of each one of these type of projects will definitely be different. For instance, when you are working with brands, and I'm just going to give you a very specific example of what I did for Hulu, I made the brown plushies that you see all over the movie Into the Dark too. It's called the Puka Dolls. If you get the chance, check out the movie. All of the brown dolls that you see on set were made by me.
Huh.
So when you, yes, funny enough, even the destroyed ones, especially the destroyed ones. Uh, yeah, so that one was very fun because they will come at you with very weird requests. And for something like that, you don't really ask. Well, I did ask what is it for, but at the end of the day, it was up to the director what to do with everything. But they just asked me for, it was either 10 or 20 dolls, and they all had to look exactly the same. And I was in constant communication with the team about how they had to look, the size, and they also had some last minute requests about they wanted the sets that I used for the eyes and the mouth. They wanted some of those separate because they were going to do something else with them. I didn't really ask what. I was like, okay, here is a set. This is how much it is. Take them, all yours. And they wanted some additional materials too. So I was like, okay, sure. I don't really need to know what it's for, but here's a bag of random additional material. And here are the dolls. So, what is very important when you're working with a brand is communication. You have to be very responsive and you have to be absolutely sure that you deliver on the deadlines that they need to. Because if you even delay, let's just say the delivery for a day or two, that means that there's a lot of people on set waiting for these items and they cannot do their work as they plan to. So obviously, you have to be very professional and you have to make sure that you always deliver things even before the deadline, just to make sure that everything goes as planned during shoots. So yeah, I will say it's a little bit stressful. Yeah, it's fun, but it's also stressful because they are usually very demanding. Large companies
Hmm.
love asking for a lot of things in very short amounts of time, but you have to just be very, very, very sure that you can deliver things on time for them. in terms of brand collaborations, well, that would be the brand collaborations more or less. When you're preparing for competitions, on the other hand, obviously there's also deadlines. But when you're preparing for competitions, you also have to make sure that you have build books so that you document extensively everything that you're doing, that you are talking about the techniques that you feature, and that you're taking photos and video constantly, because those build books, and it's basically, if people are not familiar, a build book is a building diary. You When you enter a cosplay competition, you have either 3 or 4 minutes to talk to the judges and present your big costume. And most of the time, when you have a very elaborate piece, you just won't have enough time to talk about every single part and everything that you did on that costume, and that is so special. So what we do with the build books, as competitors, we give the build books to the judges, usually multiple copies, and that way, when they are deliberating or throughout the prejudging process, they will open the book and they will see the photos, they will see the techniques, they will ask questions about it, and sometimes they will even just see parts of the costume that we didn't perhaps talk about.
Hmm.
It is very important for competition pieces that, once again, everything is cohesive, that things are lined, searched, and that just everything looks very clean. So that's a competition piece, and also that it holds up on stage, because you will walk on stage with your costume
Hmm.
and you will hit some poses. Sometimes you will do a performance like a dance, or just performing like in theater if you're doing the masquerade part of the competitions. And then finally, personal projects. Those are my favorite, honestly, because you just do it for the love of the game. Personal projects, they just have to look good. Obviously, I finish my seams, I line them, and all that. But there's so much less pressure when you're working on a personal project, simply because you just want to have fun with that costume or character. So I like taking a lot of artistic liberties with my personal projects. I add lights where maybe the character doesn't have it. And I just love, again, playing with textures and just having fun on my personal projects. So yeah, I will say that's the main difference between those three.
Sure. Now you were talking about these competitions and you judge them from time to
Mhm.
time. So, what do you look for most?
It's honestly a balance. Um, us as judges usually have a rubric, and we look into the craftsmanship, the creativity, accuracy, and the storytelling, and they all have their own value. Also, we look at, there are some performance based competitions, for example, like the World Cosplay Summit, and in that case, the performance, so what you do on stage, will be will really influence your final score.
Hmm.
But then if you are entering a normal competition, then yes, you will get a score for what you do on stage and your stage presence and how you use it and how you work the crowd, but it won't affect you as much as performance based competitions. What we are usually looking for, first of all, is we check the craftsmanship level. Competitors have the option to enter novice, journeyman, and masters. So they choose where they feel where they're at in their craftsmanship skills, and then depending on where they what their category is, then we judge them. For instance, I wouldn't judge as harshly for unfinished seams a novice as I would a master. Just to give you an example, because a novice may forget to clean a seam or to line something, and that's okay. They're novices; they're learning. But if a master forgets to deliberately forgets, let's just say, to add a lining to a piece of the costume that definitely should have been lined because it is affecting the structure of the costume overall, then that is something that more than likely will take away points from their final build. In addition to that, usually these are very competitive. You will have dozens of people entering the cosplay contest. Just to give you an example, IkiCon, I just came back from judging that cosplay contest in Austin, Texas, a couple of weeks ago, right before the freeze. And yeah, so that was a fun time. So we had about 60 something competitors that will be getting on stage. So if you just divide by three, let's just pretend that we have an even amount of numbers on each category. That is about 20 people on each category. So you're competing about 20 other costumes. And I will say that judging masters is probably the hardest category to judge because they are the ones who will surprise you with crazy things. Like some of them will weave their own fabric, others will make their own shoes, others will introduce you to embroidery techniques that you didn't know about. So, masters and journeymen are usually very hard to judge and score just because the competition level is so, so high. And novices, honestly, lately, thanks to all the access to information and all the education tools that we have out there, novices nowadays, I will say, are more advanced than the novices that we saw a few years ago. So I just love seeing the community growing and the overall level. Just the bar is getting raised at a crazy speed. And I love that.
So you've been doing this a while.
Mhm.
You've been in cosplay, costume design. How has it all changed since you started?
I will say a couple of things have changed. Number one is accessibility. How much access people have to the right tools and to a wider variety of fabrics and materials to work with. For instance, I will say that 5 or 6 years ago, let's just talk pre-pandemic. I think pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, there was a huge change in a positive way. Pre-pandemic, there was a lot of education resources, and you could order fabric online, and obviously we had Joann's and all that. So we had materials out there. But truly, I realized that during the pandemic, during the shutdown, a couple of things happened that really defined the current generation of makers. Number one being the exploding popularity of TikTok and how easy it is for everyone on social media to make a tutorial and share something that they know. And now everybody has access to that information, which is great. Number two is online shopping got a lot more popular, a lot bigger, and retailers noticed that. So they realized that they needed to make their websites more accessible. They needed to be better about sending samples. They needed to be better about offering more variety because now there was a lot more competition for retailers to offer their product and to put it in the hands of makers. Also, again, during the pandemic, everybody was getting a sewing machine.
Mm-hmm.
So that means a lot more makers. I don't know if you remember, but back in my day, during if you lived through the pandemic, you remember seeing sewing machines flying off the shelves.
Sure.
And I loved seeing that because, again, more makers. That means people of all ages were getting into it. Now, sewing was cool, modifying your clothes was cool. Cosplay slowly became more and more mainstream,
Hmm.
where before it was a lot more niche, right? It was something that, you would look at it and think, wow, how are they doing that? But now you just, if you see something, you want to learn a new skill, you just look in YouTube and you find a video and then you look into it. And another change, not a change, but I think a lot more education tools like
Hmm.
websites such like OESD or like Caesar North America or even Bernina itself, they offer a lot of educational videos, and cosplayers, makers, sewists have slowly started turning into the education sewing resources that were already out there. And big companies are also paying attention and seeing this new market, this explosion of makers trying to learn and trying to purchase products. So I think that really, really helped the cosplay boom as we see it nowadays.
So let's even take that a step further and make this a teaching moment.
Mhm,
We have sewists and quilters listening with us today,
mhm.
and they may be interested and curious about cosplay. So, what skills that they have now transfer directly, and how can they get started?
In terms of skills, I'm going to be honest, everything.
Okay,
Everything. Yes. If you know how to quilt, if you can make a straight line, if you know how to piece things together, if you can make even it a quarter inch allowance, it doesn't have to be perfect even. You can cosplay. If I'm talking about specific skills, quilters already know how to read patterns. You could easily grab a pattern off the shelf for a costume that you want to make and read it. No problem. You may just have to learn how to figure out your sizing, but in terms of cutting a pattern, placing it on the fabric, understanding grain line, bias, cross grain, you already got it. You already know how to do that. You are already familiar with color theory. You are already familiar with layering, with making bias tape, with applying, sewing your own bias tape. You already know your machine. You already know how to sew. Like just knowing how to sew, how to operate your machine is so, so powerful because that is really the tool that is going to take you through this journey. If you're a quilter, you are probably already really good at problem solving, at figuring out piecing things together. So overall, if you're a quilter, I promise you, if you grab a pattern off the shelf, you can just pick some fabrics and give it a go. You will be more than likely successful with it more than anyone who has zero experience quilting. So that's my advice. Just try it. The best way to start, I will say, perhaps making clothes and garments could be a little bit intimidating, or you look at an overlock machine and that one has a blade and three needles. So, um, things like that, you eventually get to a point where you actually need them. But if you just want to get started, you can go to Goodwill or even grab an old pair of pants in, I don't know, maybe like an old sweatshirt and just take it apart. Just take it apart, rip it at the seams, and that way you can understand how garments are made, how curves work, and that will be my best piece of advice, just to start by taking things apart and putting them back together and making your own modifications. Because if you're just playing with these garment pieces and figuring out exactly what you like, then there's really no rules. And you already know the basics because of all the quilting that you've been doing.
where do you find your inspiration?
My inspiration comes from several different places. Sometimes I am walking down the fabric aisle and I find a very fun fabric, and I immediately think, oh, this will look cool in a dress, or this will look cool as a pair of leggings or a sweater. But when I'm looking at characters, if I'm trying to make a full costume with different materials and just, like a big, big build, I will look at my favorite series, sometimes video games, sometimes comics, sometimes movies. Or I also like looking at characters that I know will be a challenge, where I look at something and I just think, wow, that looks crazy. I have no idea how I can make that happen, but I want to make it happen. So my inspiration comes from crazy projects and way too much confidence into bringing characters that look impossible to bring to real life and actually doing that.
Melanie, what's next for you and what's your dream?
What is next for me? Well, for 2026, I do have a few guest appearances lined up. I am planning to attend MomoCon to teach some sewing classes. I'm hoping to be back at YomaCon. There's DragonCon. I may even go back to Brazil and teach some classes with Bernina Brazil in December. So lots and lots of traveling. I'm very excited about that. And as what I would like to do, I would like to be part of this cosplay boom and bring in all of those young sewists into cosplay and just showing them the ropes, and also just showing them that now we have so many more materials and tools available, and just to make cosplay more accessible overall. Show everybody that cosplaying is fun, it's easy, you can build community through it, and it doesn't have to be perfect. You can just cosplay because it's fun, and that's the play in costume play.
So, in our conversation today, is there any question I didn't ask you that you wish I had?
No, I think we went over everything in the script.
Perfect. Perfect.
Mhm.
This has been so much fun. I've learned a lot, and I know our listeners have. And when they want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
If they have any specific questions about costuming or classes, you can reach out to my email. It is melanie@mjasmine.com. You can also find me on Instagram on @mjasmine.design. I also have a TikTok and Facebook, all under the same name. If you look me up on Google, Jasmine Design and Melanie Jasmine, I'm sure I will pop up, and it will be some crazy photo of me dressed up as either an angel or a giant dress. So it will be really easy to find me.
Perfect. Thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a wonderful time.
Well, there you have it. Another story about someone just like you. Someone for whom sewing and quilting is so much more than a hobby. It's a way of life and a connection to something bigger. If you know someone you think has an outstanding story, a story that should be shared on this podcast, please drop me a note to meg@soandsopodcast.com or complete the form on our website. Be sure to subscribe to, review, and rate this podcast on your favorite platform, and visit our website, sewists.com, for more information about today's and all of our guests. That's SEWANDSO podcast.com. And finally, I want to thank Bernina for making this program possible. I'm Meg Goodman, and I look forward to you joining us next time on So and So.